Okay, the top 10 episodes of Season 7. I said last year that my top 10 episodes were a pretty disappointing bunch all in all, but this season's episodes were better. I mean, actually, if I had to sum up this season in one word, it would be consistent. Its biggest strength is that, even at its worst, the episodes were not bad, they were perfectly passable. In fact, it is the first season to get 0 thumbs down from me, so that is impressive. But on the other end of the spectrum, when you add up its great episodes, it would still have to be one of the lower tallies of all the seasons, in my opinion. It is better than Season 6, which was almost a novelty for how boring it was. Like, less bad episodes and more great ones, but yeah, still, I won't say it's not interesting to see which episodes really succeeded. This was kind of like the little season that could. It really tried to dig into what it had to work with, start fresh, and just keep plugging away at it, and it is kind of interesting to see where it managed to hit above par. There were some episodes I really wasn't expecting to stand out that did, so alright, my top 10. Number 10, Uncommon Bond. Alright, now this one took Starlight's limited social skills to sensitive, uncomfortable, and even awkward places. Deliciously awkward. I mean, some of it was ham-fisted or obligatory, but most of it was a breath of fresh air. It starts with a relatable problem, feeling like you've grown apart from an old friend or that someone else is upstaging you in front of them, and it uses that to really play around with these characters, dig into them, explore what we've seen from them. And that's especially true for adding Maud and Trixie to throw some fun variety in there, not just relying on Twilight until it gets old. But that said, Twilight is at least cuter and more dimensional than she's been in most of her recent episodes here, and we're gonna come back to that, by the way. It's a little loose with its structure, which doesn't result in anything overwhelmingly good, but it's breezy, engaging, and pretty nuanced in ways that other episodes lately have been stilted. Number 9. Forever Philly. I still can't believe there was ever a time where I had this one in first. Man, this season was a slow starter. Anyway though, it's pretty much like I said in my season review. Relatable conflict, okay job on the cast, overdone way of hammering in the conflict, fantastic job on Rarity. Everything about it just has its finger right on the pulse where she's concerned. Her funny, over-the-top side, her sweet, affectionate side, even her condescending side, which for the record this episode was trying to do in a ham-fisted way, still just felt very distinctly Rarity this time around. I don't know if it's because of Tabitha St. Germain's delivery, or it's just kind of how the lines turn out naturally when you have to write them for this character, but whatever the case, the conflict between her and Sweetie Belle didn't feel too ham-fisted this time around. It was a little slow, a little obvious, but that I can live with. And as much as they did a better job on this sister dynamic back in the old days when Sweetie Belle was a much stronger presence, it is still kind of relatable here, and I can roll with that too. Number 8. Campfire Tales. As a Sleepless in Ponyville follow-up, this episode lays out some of the same great dynamic for a second round of fun, but it doesn't have quite the same finesse. For example, last time Scootaloo could be scared, but the problem was more that she was fighting to hide it, trying to bottle it up and causing it to eat at her even more. This time she's just kind of scared of everything because it's her gimmick. And where the stories they told each other last time were all woven into the larger story, here they just kind of let it be an anthology, just like one after the other, and then they try to make a few offhand connections to the main story just when they cut back to it. And to top it off, 2 of the 3 stories are pretty standard. There's a brave character who needs to achieve something big, the odds are against them, they have some cool visuals, and then they pull it off. Still, it's hard to go wrong when you have the characters and the environment that contributed to one of the best episodes in the entire series. I mean, this crew of 6 has really good chemistry together, and the thing with the Flighters is a lot of fun too. Plus, it does manage to get one pretty good story in there courtesy of Rarity. It was different, offbeat, sincere, lovable, and at times just plain kinda cool. It almost had an anime flavor, really, which was neat. So yeah, I guess Rarity was kind of a redeeming factor for this season. Speaking of which, number 7. It Isn't the Main Thing About You. Watching this episode, there was a point where I was considering it for a spot among the great ones. And that didn't last as it became clear it wasn't a shoot-for-the-moon type of episode. Like, it didn't mind repetition or hijinks to fill itself out, it wasn't afraid of cornball humor, but still, you could tell early on that there was a little more to it than that, an innovation of sorts, an enthusiasm. And that mainly comes out in the humor, like watching Pinkie Pie say exactly what the solution is going to be to get rid of the silly string and then just shrugging and pulling out a crowbar instead, or the spooky eyes in the forest, or the surprisingly dark joke where some poor pony just randomly has her mane stolen while they're trying to fix Rarities, and that's it. But it also comes out in how it makes you feel for Rarity. This episode makes you realize that few things are considered more demeaning today than not having all your hair while you're still young, unless it's by choice. And it does kind of a pitch-perfect job exploiting that to make you feel Rarity's pain. Like, it draws Rarity as best it can to emphasize how off this looks, and then it almost makes you worry with her about being spotted without her hood, which then actually happens a couple of times for just a couple brief moments, so yeah. Nicely done. And even though it doesn't mind just saying what the moral is, that yeah, hair does not equal confidence, it still shows it in a way that really does feel like the ups and downs someone might go through there. And to top it off, the way that Rarity recovers herself is actually very believable, because I mean, I did not expect them to be able to make her look okay like that without cheating, so yeah, it's also a very good moral on working with what you're given, and being proud of it. Number 6. Once Upon a Zeppelin. Okay, so if Main Thing About You had just one thing that could have made it a great episode, this one had just one thing holding it back. It does kind of go the standard, repetitive, watch every event go wrong one by one for the same reason approach when it comes to Twilight trying to cover for her family's perfect vacation. So yeah, ham-fisted setup for the moral, but otherwise, this is a nice offbeat location for a great character piece on pretty much everyone involved. Well, maybe not Shining Armor. Spike is absolutely great in his moment to shine that shows how well he knows Twilight and how he's still kind of smug, but he's also a very good-hearted, well-meaning little assistant. Cadence, they do a great job on, once again, making her a sincere but hands-off mentor to Twilight. Twilight's mom has tons of fun with the whole thrill-seeker angle they do. Even Iron Will is used just right here. I mean, it's been 5 seasons, but they get his charismatic, overly aggressive, tough but fair businessman angle just about perfect. Although the other big flaw here might be not acknowledging that Twilight's problems were less his fault than her parents. Yeah, never read the fine print when somebody offered you something too good to be true! And everyone else, Star Tracker, the dad, the fans, yeah, all done just about right. But none more so than Twilight herself. Sometimes the show falls back on melodrama with storylines like this, but this time they make it very relatable, just how Twilight sees a chance to do some good and send everyone home happy. She's not even trying to make like this dramatic sacrifice because love her, darn it! You know, it's just something she feels like she can manage, something she can be proud of at the end of the day. It feels exactly like something she'd try and how she would try it. And the way she gets her heart cut out for her trouble is even more relatable. Because the unfortunate truth with this kind of thing is that while friends and family might try to be grateful and considerate, you know, they're still not mind readers. It's not always easy to see from the outside looking in how unfair this kind of scenario can be or what you're getting hit with. I mean, sometimes downplaying what you're doing for someone can work a little too well. And the moral that it's important to know when self-respect matters and when maintaining a role has its limit feels like exactly the kind of moral that Princess Twilight should be learning. It is a perfect fit and we feel for her every step of the way. In fact, I'd go so far as to argue that this is the only episode since after she became the Princess of Friendship to successfully tell a story about Twilight. Well, maybe Castle Sweet Castle, but this one's better. And now the A material. Yes, we had 5 great episodes this season on my card. How many of the expected fan favorites made it? How many got thrown out altogether for my personal choice of underrated gems? Here we go. Number 5. To Change a Changeling. I wish more episodes this season had been like this one. I really do. I mean, it took the time to pick out a conflict that was on the table with some stakes to it, and then it just dug in. It had fun with everyone all the way across. Let me rephrase that. It dug into things that felt in keeping, not just things it could make excuses for. But yeah, I love what it did with the characters here. Trixie and Starlight strike just the right balance of competence and comic relief. They're like the screw-up cops that we still root for and still know are going to be our heroes on some level. And the Changelings trying to get the hang of love and tolerance now being their favorite, most important thing is actually kind of priceless. But the conflict with a Changeling that doesn't want to leave the old ways behind is one that needed to happen, and making him Thorax's brother is something that makes it even stronger still. He does have some funny moments clashing with the others, but what I really appreciate here is that this episode at least acknowledges that there is such a thing as someone who's just bad news and isn't worth the trouble, and that it knows it has to then establish why this brother isn't that guy. And for such a serious conflict, they make sure to pack in those hammy little moments about how the others don't like him and what a drag he is, and then they have Starlight set it into motion by doing something stupid even for her, and then the Deus Ex Machina about how her speech apparently had a delayed effect that didn't even matter anyway. Okay, so maybe the writing here isn't quite good enough to call this one a great one, but I do think the sheer fun is enough to get it over the line. For one, a little action can go a long way when it's cool enough, and not only was the Mallworth a pretty cool creation, so was Pharynx's giant bug form. Somebody's flexing their creativity there. Plus, not only is it nice to see Starlight and Trixie contribute on that front too, it's also a lot of fun just to see them plan stuff and bounce ideas off each other. They have a really fun, colorful dynamic together. Even if a lot of it involves Trixie being the jerk that she is. And like I said, bits like the Changelings trying to get the hang of a feelings forum led by a Changeling hippie are hilarious. So yeah, between all of that and nothing that feels too stilted or fake, I can look back on this one as a standout. Number 4. Discordant Harmony. As usual, it is hard to go wrong with Discord. And by his standards, this episode is at least a pretty decent showing. It has a lot of good visual gags, his concern about making Fluttershy happy is at least identifiable, and it does make for at least a few classic Discord moments. But obviously, that wouldn't be enough on its own for 4th place. I mean, it does start to slow down and get repetitive by the middle portion, and that is just not A material. As it turns out, though, this was also the episode to really dig into the friendship between Discord and Fluttershy, which was long overdue, but evidently well worth waiting for. The moment where Fluttershy realizes what's wrong, so now she has to do her part in worrying about Discord, that's where it's like, okay, plug that in, and now the circuit is complete. Now it feels like this really genuine, fun story about two friends who just really want to enjoy this fun, special thing they have together. So yeah, it's really sweet, it's fun in that offbeat Discord Fluttershy way we all really like. I've said all this multiple times before. What are we still doing here? Number 3. Secrets and Pies. You might remember any of the times I've gone on about being disappointed with parental guidance, especially for a writer who had writing credits on both Avatar series and the new Voltron show. But I still really liked the first act of it, how it managed to mix over-the-top silliness, clever writing, and strong characterization. I thought if he just could have kept that up for the whole runtime, we would have had a really strong episode. And yeah, this is the one where he pulled it off. This episode takes Pinkie Pie and brings back the insecurity we've seen from her at times, but applies it to a new scenario that could also bring it out, a new way that it could get the best of her. But this time it's like that itch she just really needs to scratch, just so hung up on this one thing, the giving the desserts to Rainbow possibly not being what she wanted it to be. And this time it seems like the writer has his finger right on the pulse of how to demonstrate that while having fun with it at the same time. For example, he makes use of stuff like the detective shtick or Pinkie's screwball fantasies, but he does them his own way. You know, he makes them fit the scenario. It's not like Anxious Twilight, where now she'll do that at the drop of a hat because, oh, you remember Lesson 0 and the test-taking episodes and stuff? Yep, she does that. Like, no, like Pinkie's fantasy, for example, this time it was more like an Arthur the Aardvark nightmare fantasy, kind of making fun of these irrational fears that we all have, while also identifying them, you know, like still getting the emotions across. And actually, that's the sort of balance that the whole episode strikes. It knows when to be relatable and when to just cut loose and make it totally over the top, just make fun of how silly these things can get. Like, I love how obvious it is that Rainbow isn't eating Pinkie's pies, ew, but Pinkie can't just assume that because she's just so wrapped up in this. She just can't let this go until she knows for absolute certain, and then maybe calls Rainbow out on it too. And how Rainbow's also had to become pretty darn good at this is hilarious. Like, she has her own tank disposal pipe, that's great. The slapstick gags she pulls to get out of eating these are great. The blink scene, that was a minor stroke of genius, just love it. And the fans, of course, mostly let it come and go like any other episode. Or else said it was, too weird, or too unpleasant, too bad a showing for Rainbow Dash, for thinking it would make things easier to tell a lie. What is with you people? Like, whoa, an episode that's like not the norm, that's like offbeat? No, we don't want that. That's like outside the norm. No, we don't want that. We want to keep being spoon-fed the same bland sugar every week. You know, we want things to be like they usually are, like, whoa, whoa. Best season ever. We're still talking about Perfect Pair, right? No, actually that was like 15 weeks ago. Oh. What episode are we talking about again? Marks and Recreation. Oh. Whoa. Whoa. Best season ever. I mean, Rainbow dealing with a character flaw? And not even one that's only supposed to make us love her even more, and just like a problem that people deal with every day? What kind of conflict is that? Lying about eating those pies was totally not the most tactful way to deal with that. And when has Rainbow Dash ever not been the tactful type? It's not like the first Pinkie and Rainbow Dash episode ever showed that Rainbow's solution for not wanting to hurt the other person's feelings is to avoid the whole thing altogether. Oh no, we don't care about that. We're too busy worrying about stuff that doesn't matter. Like whether it's been sort of kind of maybe possibly implied before that Rainbow Dash ate a pie, or whether Applejack is really supposed to be less of a pie baker than Pinkie. Oh yeah, truly we know what message to send to get the A material out of this production team. We have it all figured out. So yeah, this would have to be my pick for most underrated episode of the season. You're free to disagree, but hey, my list. And I think it's classic Pinkie and Rainbow at the top of their games. Number 2. The Perfect Pair. Yeah, we all knew this one was coming. This was one of the few episodes to do straight-up drama and just nail it across the board. It was a big credit to its season, it made no major mistakes, it took on a story we were all waiting for and actually managed to deliver. And even after saying all that, people are still gonna say I'm insulting its honor by putting it in second, because clearly it is the greatest episode ever! Well, first of all, it takes more than a premise to win me over, so be grateful that I'm still saying this is definitely an A-grade episode. I mean, personally, I think a lot of the greatest episodes ever got there on just kind of telling fans what they wanted to hear. I think a lot of fans are fine with grading on a curve when it comes to that, with letting the episode off the hook because it should have been a two-parter or some such. Because yeah, apparently that's the same thing as making a great two-parter, making a one-parter that poorly makes use of its time. So yeah, join me in being glad that this did not turn out to be another Crusaders of the Lost Mark if you were around for that. Anyway though, yeah, this episode looks through a lot of different sides to this story. How the Apple siblings feel about discovering all this for the first time, how Grandpere feels looking back on it all of these years later, how the parents influenced all of these people, and all of it works. There is some impressive restraint and nuance at work here. In fact, if I had to say why this one doesn't quite have the edge to be one of my core favorites, it's actually that it's almost too restrained. Like, if I had to sum this one up in one word, it would be sweet. I mean, there's definitely some bitter thrown in there to give it some kick, but if you look at this romance story, there's not really a strong conflict playing against it until the very end. It's just kind of trying to us into loving it. And granted, I prefer that any day to just falling back on cheap melodrama, just trying to tell us that something is deep or meaningful because the characters cry like it is. But yeah, if hitting it out of the park weren't a tricky balance, then everyone would do it. Otherwise though, you've probably heard it all before from people who spent a lot more time talking about it than I will. But if I had to pick my personal favorite moments, it would either be Big Mac asking the dad's old friend if he could come back and hear more stories about his dad later, or any of the moments between Grandpere and the Apple siblings, including at the beginning with Apple Bloom, because yeah, all of those have some real weight to them. Those followed by Pear Butter serenading Bright Mac and how that scene plays out, because for what it was, that was a pretty good slice of romance. So all in all, a great episode, lots of ambition and lots of craft to go with it. Doesn't quite resonate with me enough to be one of my core favorites, but hey, that's the beauty of different perspectives.
Number 1. Shadowplay.
Okay, siding with this one over Perfect Pair might seem like style over substance. And yeah, there are a lot of ways that even I could call myself into question for saying that this episode is as good as I think it is. I mean, this is a very plot-driven episode, and honestly, last season's two-parter was probably more clever in its plotting. It had some pretty good ways of moving the whole Invade the Hive conflict along like some really scary chess game. And this one, meanwhile, gets kinda ham-fisted in how it tries to drive home its points. It's even okay with, just letting Star Swirl or Twilight be blockheads so they can demonstrate what not to do. Or as far as upping the tension or the personal drama, the Season 4 finale had both of those in spades and still managed to do everything that this one did on top of it. Here, the Pony of Shadows never really gets to earn his stripes as a world-ending threat, so the conflict is a bit more leisurely. And while you're at it, the Season 4 finale also tied in its build-up better. It didn't just take pieces that were thrown into other stories and say, surprise, they were relevant. How they played in and what they represented still was also important. But then again, I would not be offended if you tried to say that the Season 4 finale is the greatest episode in the entire show, so that might not be fair. And yeah, in spite of all of that, this episode packs in something that just gives it a lot more meat to chew on than most other episodes these days. And that's lore. Not offhand world building, lore. Relevant lore. Lore that ties into the characters' larger stories, gives them things to do that feel important for them to be doing. And that is not as easy as it looks. You can't just make up some big ancient problem and say, ta-da, important. That does not just automatically make for a compelling story. I mean, if you don't believe me, we've actually had episodes try to go for just a strand of that and still managed to mess it up. Like the Crystalling tried to insert some lore on the Crystal Heart and why it's important, and that felt like an excuse for the problem of the day, from the setup all the way to the delivery. Or Princess Twilight in Season 4. That tried to tell us Nightmare Moon's origin story and come up with a nice dramatic way for it to play out, and it forgot about not making it the portion of the episode that contributed absolutely nothing, that had absolutely no reason to be there. But here, even without the Pony of Shadows doing much of anything, you believe them when they say it's important to stop it, because they take the time to lay out and show us everything that goes into that, everything that went into it the first time, in fact. It also pays a lot of attention to the language the characters use. Nothing they say sounds like they're imagining the 6-year-old in the audience in place of whoever they're actually talking to. It thinks out why all of this would be a challenge to these characters, even as far as understanding the handwriting in some of these spells, and it shows how they use their skills to bring what's needed. In fact, For the most part, Twilight in particular feels like she's going about this in a way very specific to her. I mean, I guess if you look back, her nerdy side has become a little cutesier than it was originally, but that just is what it is. The way she goes about this and gets invested in it and cares about it all feel like they're being done in a very Twilight way. And that's what I've really been wanting from Twilight while they've been half-heartedly putting her in the mentor role and walking her through the same old paces. When you grow and mature, it's not that you stop having problems, it's that you're ready for problems on a higher scale. You're able to achieve bigger and gain more for it. It doesn't feel like they regress Twilight at all in this episode, but she still doesn't feel like the biggest authority in the room. And all of it pays off in how this conflict plays out. I mean, it feels like we're finally delving into stuff that's only been hinted at before. It doesn't even feel like this conflict is the full extent of it. It feels like there's a lot more behind the curtain that could still come back another day. Perhaps most significantly, though, when Twilight talks to Stygian at the end, it doesn't feel like a Deus Ex Machina, and it doesn't feel like a Heart of the Cards speech. It feels like confronting the problem in a way that legitimately supports the moral and the character arcs here. I'm not saying it's all everything, but when it's me saying that about one of this show's moments of feel-good drama that solves the problem, with my history with that and everything, I'd like to think that counts for something. And with that, we've reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If not, simply create your own overlong top 10 episodes list to explain why. And if you'd like to watch another video, click the link on the right. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and here's to Season 8.